Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, society modeling, and a world with no children. All right, let's jump into it. So, one of my favorite things that I love in the world is Slate Political Gabfest. And it's a podcast that's been on for like 15 years. It has three brilliant people, Emily Bazelon, David Plotz, and John Dickerson. I knew all these people, I've been listening to these people for 15 years. And so I knew them when they were just schlub Harvard graduates, right? And they didn't really have any achievements. Now, Emily Bazelon is like a Yale adjunct professor. She was like a Yale adjunct professor, and like she writes for like the New York Times. One of those hoity-toity, like high-end New York, like, known throughout the world magazines or newspapers, one or the other. David Plotz was CEO of Atlas Obscura. Now he's actually launching an incredibly very ambitious local news source, a new modern local news source, which I'm incredibly excited about. And John Dickerson is on like 60 Minutes and CBS. These people are brilliant. They're like smart as smart can be, right? And all of them come from like Ivy League schools, and they're brilliant. And every week they talk for 1 hour together and they discuss that week's politics, right? Well, they do now I'm a special Gabfest member, and I get these things, special. A lot of podcasts have this now, where they have an extra special segment at the end that people who listen to the free podcast don't get. But I'm like a dyed-in-the-wool member, and I have like a real membership, and I get an ad-free version of the show that has a special dialogue at the end with all three of the hosts, and they talk about just fun stuff or just things that they're interested in that week. It doesn't have to be political, right? So this week, they all discussed an article that they had read together, which is an article that has been happening for the last 5 or 10 years. And basically it's a pretty standard article. It runs in every New York Times. It runs in every New York magazine, every Washington magazine. And basically it's, is it okay to have kids today? Right? This seems ludicrous to me. Sorry, I have a hard time even taking this serious. I have 4 kids, right? So I'm kind of like, duh, yeah, you should have kids, right? Like, as a parent, I can tell you right now, this argument is ridiculous for me to even listen to, because I'm like, parenthood transforms your life. It's the best thing you'll ever do. It turns out golden, right? I've been married for 29 years and I got 4 kids, and the only question is how many of them are going to be valedictorian. That's the only question we have, right? Like this is not really a debate for Garibays, right? But with that said, what they are debating what these 3 hosts were talking about was, with climate change coming, with pandemics hitting, right? With violence sweeping across the world, right? Actually, violence is going way down, but the coverage of it is higher than ever, right? With all these things said, is it okay to bring kids into this world? Now, again, it's, as an evangelical Christian who's a father of 4, I don't even understand the language this is speaking, right? But this is a legit concern for some people, right? Now, also, I will say, tell me if I'm wrong here. This is my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the pattern I've seen is that the people who have the most resources and need to worry the least actually worry the most, right? So that's where this is coming from. It's people with lots of money and more than enough resources to take care of children worried if they should have kids, right? It's the most ridiculous thing, right? But this is a very real concern for many people who are not baller confident people like me, right? Who legit, probably very capable, very smart people who are legitimately concerned about this. This is a very real question for not a small number of American adults, right? So with that said, I think this is the perfect opportunity to use Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition society modeling, right? Now, this is a concept that I've come up with. I've never heard anybody talk about this before, Please let me know if you've heard anybody talk about this before. But it is my opinion that Dungeons and Dragons can be used to do society modeling. Now, what is this? So basically what you would do is you would take smart, engaged dungeon masters, and they would choose to do society modeling with Dungeons and Dragons. And so what they would do is they would start a campaign. This campaign would be between 5 and 15 sessions, okay? And it would be tracked by the Dungeon Master. And what the Dungeon Master would do is they would set up a traditional Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaign, stating the number of sessions at the beginning, between 5 and 15 sessions, and then create a world for the players to play in that has an American societal problem in the game, masked in the fantasy realm, right? That is going to be put forward in the game, okay? Now, why would you do this? Here you go. I'll tell you why you would do this. So it seems ridiculous to try to solve society's problems with Dungeons and Dragons, right? It seems that way. Yes. Well, guess what? We live in an utterly ridiculous world, right? Right now, if you go buy 1 ounce of gold, it'll cost you $1,800. If you go buy a string of numbers called a Bitcoin, it'll cost you $60,000. Guess what? The world's upside down. We're in a new era. So let's talk about it, right? So guess what? Dungeons & Dragons, in my opinion, has a really unique opportunity to supply solutions for societal problems at no cost. And get this, these societal problems, it is becoming increasingly possible that science cannot solve them. Okay, so let's talk about science for a minute. And here's the issue, right? Bitcoin is the key, right? Bitcoin is not worth $60,000 a coin because it's valuable. It's worth $60,000 a coin because people are so frustrated with traditional currency. Okay, and that's where D&D comes in. I think there is a very legitimate reason to be outrageously frustrated with modern science. So I don't question for 1 minute that modern science has the ability to still do reports and gather metrics and then report those metrics. What I doubt, and I think what many Americans doubt now, is that it can do it in an unbiased way. Okay? Every scientific report that comes out now, you're like, hey, I love your opinion on how the Earth is cooling or not cooling, but I reject your numbers, not because I have any issue with the scientific numbers, but that was funded by somebody who uses a big block pickup and eats double cheeseburgers, right? Who owns companies that create those products. And then the other side is like, hey, so you have a scientific report that says that the Earth is warming. Right? The one I just said. That science says that the Earth is cooling, right? But everybody's like, those reports don't matter because they're owned by companies that make big block pickups and double cheeseburgers, right? And then the other side's like, yeah, well, we reject your scientific report because we know that the people who back that are all companies who make hummus, sandals, and electric cars. Done, right? So that's just it. We've reached a point where institutions are failing left and right, okay? Which brings up an opportunity for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is very strangely, unintentionally connected to incredibly smart people and incredibly wealthy people. That's a fact, period. End of sentence, right? I've discussed that in other videos. All right, so with that, you have 500,000 DMs, right? If some portion of them, 100, 1,000, choose to run a society model, you can produce innovative ideas to solve society problems. And because it's coming from this very unusual source, it may be accepted and tried. These innovative solutions could be tried, and the reason why is generally Dungeons & Dragons is not considered to have a political bent, red or blue. There you go, right? So how would you do this, right? So there was this discussion on whether people should have kids today, right? Well, what could you do with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition to answer that question? Well, a dungeon master could simply set up a game where no more children are able to be birthed, right? And that's it. And here's the thing. They're going to run the game normally, right? There's going to be dungeons. There's going to be dragons, right? But in the first session, they will say, one of the things that happened 6 months ago is there are no more children being born, period. None, right? Now, they can leave it there. Do the player characters investigate that, right? Do they do something about it? Do they accept it, right? What happens with the player characters going forward? How do they respond to a world that has no more children being born? Are any of the player characters sad about that? Are any of the non-player characters sad about that? And then once you get that game rolling, you are in a society model, right? And get this, it's free. Now, I already talked about society modeling, and one of the people, I actually think it was GT Ignacio, said, hey, how's this free, right? Here's how it's free. These dungeon masters are not going to get paid for this, and that's another reason why there's a possibility that the findings, the innovative solutions that are found in these games could be used, because they're not coming from a biased source, right? They're like, that's really important. Nobody is questioning science's ability to find answers. What is being questioned is the institutions that are using science. Are they telling you everything? Are they hiding the numbers they don't want you to see? Are they showing you the numbers they do want you to see? That's the part that people are saying, hey, scientifically, this is a real problem, right? And this has been a real issue because, the media will talk about your scientific finding way before it's been scientifically reproduced, right? And there's no question, there's absolute proof that people have been gaining ground, saying things are scientifically backed, when in reality they haven't even been reproduced scientifically. It's just one wackadoo scientist, or actually one completely valid scientist saying something, and the media doing 1,000 reports before the reproducing scientific evidence is even before the second experiment is even started, right? Like, that's a very real thing, right? So basically, once you get the society modeling running, right, dungeon masters can run whatever they want, right? And so since they're going, dungeon masters going to dungeon master, they're already running games. So why not add in these structures that model American societal problems, right? And then see what solutions and what reactions the player characters and the non-player characters have, right? Because there's a possibility that by just putting player characters into these situations, the dungeon master and or any of the brilliant players who are interacting with these societal models could produce ideas, responses, and reactions that are genuinely useful, right? And because it's coming from this incredibly strange angle, there may be and because the media loves to talk about innovative ideas and things that haven't been tried before, this could be dramatically helpful, in my opinion, right? And honestly, the other thing is, to me, it does seem crazy to go searching for searching for answers to society's problems in something that people perceive to be a game, but it seems a lot less like crazy when there are major institutions that have had lots of respect for a long time, who is now routinely being reported that they were not, that there was bias in the mix, right? There was no failure in the ability in collecting the samples and getting everything. Where there was a failure was what was found. Were the companies, involved willing to expose the information to everyone, no matter what they found? And increasingly, the answer has been found to be no, right? So if traditional institutions are failing us, it's time to look at non-traditional solutions, non-traditional methods to get real answers to society's problems. And I believe that in a very unusual, unintended way, Dungeons and Dragons, because it has an inarguable link to intelligence and wealth, right? They have thousands of DMs who can run it. They have thousands of DMs who could just choose to run these type of society model campaigns, and then dramatically, truthfully display the results, right? And we really don't have any. We don't have models that will allow this that could be received well, because Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have a PR problem, right? It doesn't have it doesn't have the incredibly fraught relationship that many of these institutions have to our society. I really think we could. And the other thing is, when it comes to, and you couldn't do that, and frankly, I'm not sure you could even scientifically research this, right? There's no way you could ever do any kind of experiment that would deny anyone the right to have children, right? It's completely untouchable. So that's another issue, is Dungeons and Dragons has the ability, because it's fictional and because it's in the imagination, to look in depth at problems that society said that science would literally have no ability to look at, right? Because it would affect people's lives, right? I'm really interested in this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition specifically could be used to do a society model for a society where where there are no longer children being had? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.